So, welcome everybody to this conversation about kindness and compassion with three teachers from within meditation. So delighted that we're going to be exploring this topic together today. Before we get started, let's begin with a little bit of meditation to help everybody arrive in the space. Lauren, would you lead us in a grounding meditation?
Yeah, I would love to. All right, so go ahead and close your eyes if it feels safe. Just take a moment to come into the present moment, to come into your body, and start to breathe into your belly. So you'll feel your belly balloon out and then collapse. Just allowing yourself to be present with your breath. Maybe slowing and deepening your breath. Letting go of any thoughts of what's to come after this and what came before this. Noticing the surface beneath you, feeling it ground you, support you. Allowing yourself to feel safe in this space. And then in this space, I invite you to call to mind one person that you love with your whole heart. Or maybe this is a person, a thing, an activity, an animal. Noticing how your body feels as you focus on this person, this thing, and noticing how your heart feels. Maybe it feels a bit expanded. Maybe you feel some slight buzzing, tingling of this energy of love. Breathing into your heart, into this space, allowing it to expand out. Calling to mind one thing about this person, this thing, this animal that feels safe to you, that feels loving and nourishing. And now turning this focus, this energy to yourself. Call to mind one thing that you love about yourself, that you're grateful for or proud of about yourself. Your ability to love, to show up again and again. Maybe your resilience or your sense of humor. Taking in one deep breath into this energy of love and adoration for yourself, gratitude for yourself. Letting that go with a sigh. Taking in one more deep breath. and letting that go. Placing both hands on your heart, or one on your heart, one on your belly, however you feel connected. And saying either out loud or in your mind, I love you. Allowing yourself to feel this love in return. Whenever you're ready, maybe you begin to bring some movement back into your fingers and your toes. Maybe you stretch out your arms, blinking your eyes open, coming back into this space. Welcome back.
Thank you, Lauren. That was wonderful.
Yeah, of course.
Really lovely. Thank you for starting us off with that. And now I want to welcome the three of you into this conversation. And I'd love it if Kim and Manisha and Lauren, if each of you can share a little bit about yourself as a teacher, whatever you'd like to share in this conversation before we get started. Let's begin with Kim.
Thanks, Hannah, and everybody, and to all of our community watching this live and in replay. So my name is Kim. I live in San Francisco. I have had an active meditation practice for over a decade, and it's been an incredible part of my life journey as I've continued to practice bringing more awareness and curiosity and like an active kindness and active compassion. So not just something you read about and you're like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense, but really integrating it and activating it like in daily life. And part of my journey has been the journey of also kind of leaving one career. And I now am a life coach, and I have a podcast called the New Manager Podcast, because I think it's really interesting to bring these practices like to life, right? So for today, we're talking about kindness and compassion, which is such an integral part of my practice and the way that I teach. I'm not currently on the regular rotation, so you have to catch me as a sub, but we'll see. Schedules change. So that's a little bit about me and my background, and I'm really looking forward to being in this conversation with everyone today.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. How about you, Manisha?
Hi, everyone. Also, just really grateful to be here today to have this conversation with all of you and to be able to share this with the Within community and beyond. So I am also a teacher at Within, but not on the permanent schedule at the moment. So again, catch me as a sub or in other events like this one. And again, that may change in the future. So always keep your eye out. I'm really interested in this conversation today because I think compassion and kindness are very dynamic in our lives rather than static. So being able to learn from others, keep the conversation going, keep a sense of curiosity about what it means to hold these really important aspects of our experience in a way that's easeful is what I would say. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. A little bit more about me. I live in Seattle. I'm currently a graduate student in counseling, really hoping to bring qualities of mindfulness into that new profession, and excited to hear more from everyone today.
Thank you, Manisha. And how about you, Lauren?
Yeah, so I am a teacher here at Within as well. I teach breathwork on Saturday mornings. Compassion has been such a big part of my own self-healing journey of just meeting myself where I'm at, having love for kind of my pain and what I've been through, and just understanding that we all have similar experiences as humans, and having compassion for other people allows us to show up in kind of a more grounded place, more understanding, more loving. And so, yeah, compassion is definitely a big part of my daily life, part of my daily meditations, part of reflection, and just how I show up to the world. And I think also, everyone has different experiences with compassion. So it's exciting to be here and to talk with all of you about just how it plays different parts in all of our lives.
Thanks, Lauren. I'll just introduce myself very briefly. I'm Hannah Knapp. I'm the co-founder of Within Meditation, and I also teach in the studio on Monday mornings. And I've certainly been exploring compassion and kindness in my own life and in my teaching for a long time. And it's always a rich subject, so I'm really delighted we're exploring it together today. And just building off of what you were just saying, Lauren, would you share with us when you say the word compassion, what do you mean? How would you define compassion?
Yeah. So I took some time reflecting on this last night because I was like, what does this actually mean to me? And I think compassion for me is kind of the ability to feel my own pain and feel others or feel other people's pain through this lens of like loving, nurturing kindness. And so self-compassion for me is the ability to kind of say, hey, I hear you, you're valid in how you're feeling. I still love you. We're gonna get through this. Kind of like a self pep talk of like feeling what I'm feeling, but not avoiding it and pushing it down, kind of letting it come through. And then compassion as I show up in relationships and in the world is kind of this understanding of we're all going through this human experience, which, goes in waves and at times isn't easy for all of us. So just understanding that people are all going through their own set of challenges. And if you have a less than ideal interaction with someone, that it's probably coming from a place of maybe someone had a bad morning versus, like if you're driving and then someone has road rage, it's like, oh, well, what went on this morning? And like, how can I just show up in a more loving way and like understanding where people are coming from versus taking things a little personally. Yeah.
I love that. How would you build on that or differ from that, Kim or Manisha?
I love that. I love that example and that framing. And what was coming to mind for me as I was listening was, for me, I think of compassion in terms of this desire to alleviate suffering, right? Like the desire that, oh, someone is in suffering, they're in pain. I desire that they be free of that and that they have a greater sense of well-being. And one of the ways I've kind of been able to make that like a part of how I do life. And we've got the holidays coming up, which can be a very multidimensional time for people. It can be wonderful. It can be challenging. It can be all kinds of things. And I remember some years ago, I was preparing to go, it might have even been Thanksgiving, actually, like big family gathering at the holidays. And there was going to be a relative there that I love, but who has some very different views about the world than I do. And I always was kind of preparing for, friction and just like gritting my teeth and, like this. And what I decided kind of going into this, knowing that this might be challenging, right, was thinking, my intention for this is not to tell this person they're wrong or to build my case about the way I see things are the right way or whatever. Like my intention, and also like my intention is not to just shut down and kind of be grumpy and cold the whole time. I was really thinking about, how do I want to spend this time? And I thought, I want to enjoy being with this person. Like it's most simple. I just want to enjoy being with this person. And then when we gathered and, like true to form, they're like, let me give you my opinion about the world and about things. What actually really helped me navigate that and stay connected and present with that person was kind of going into, like, in a sense, it's like compassion offers a door. And so asking them and sort of saying, it sounds like you're really worried about the future, right? And they're like, yeah, I actually really am. I'm really worried about the future. And so this sense of like, if we're here, if being here is about compassion, like where is the compassion in the situation? How can I bring compassion here? This at its simplest form, to recognize suffering and to desire an alleviation of it. It just creates a different set of options for how to be present, how to connect, how to engage, which I found to be very helpful for me in that moment, right? Because we don't have to get into the content. We can really get into the heart, the part that's like, what's underneath that? It's a fear, it's a worry, it's the pain of what will happen, I don't know. And that can actually be a really lovely way to connect and engage and meet the moment as it arises.
I really appreciate what Lauren and Kim have touched on so far with regard to, what is compassion in our lives. And in particular, I think, thinking about compassion and the obstacles we have towards self-compassion and compassion for others is part of meditation practice, just noticing where those sticky points are. And, you know, Kim gave a beautiful example of how to navigate that kind of thing. And also being really easeful in our approach to cultivating compassion for ourselves and others, knowing that it's not something you accomplish and then you're done, but something that's ongoing, right? There's always some hiccup, there's always some aspect of another or ourselves that is, really a challenge to feeling compassion or even empathy, love, all of those aspects of our experience. And I think with mindfulness or meditation practices, it's really about being able to give ourselves some space to be accepting of our experience. If there's a relative of or a person in your life where it's difficult to show compassion for them, having compassion for that experience in and of itself, just starting to sort of loosen up those tight balls of wanting to be perfect or wanting something to be a certain way or wanting someone to change and just being with what's there. So I definitely think acceptance is part of the conversation. And then the other thing is identifying a little bit less with how we feel about things ourselves and others, knowing that these sort of thoughts and emotions are going to come through, right? You might have a reaction to seeing somebody over the holidays, for example, that maybe, it's sort of triggering to some of your emotions, and knowing that that may happen, and also knowing that there's not always something we have to do about it, right? Because we can, as Kim showed us, take a few deep breaths, re-ground ourselves, as Lauren showed us, excuse me, and 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 just be with what's there.
Yeah, and that's reminding me too, that there's like one of the teachings, I can't remember where I kind of gathered this, but the image, especially around emotions, I think as humans generally, we're really not often given clear instructions about what to do with emotions. Like, what are they? What do we do with them? And so that image of like, you are the ocean. Every emotion that you experience is a wave. They come and go, they rise and fall. And so that ability to observe, right? Like to notice, wow, I'm having this emotion right now. And like exactly to your point, Manisha, it's not like I have to do something about it. I don't have to make it go away. I don't have to understand the story of where it came from, but being in that moment, awareness of, wow, like I'm feeling this emotion. I might not even know what it is. It might be like there's a couple of them in play right now, but I have this emotion, right? Like it's that sense of, to depersonalize things, like not like I am, not to identify like I am this. It's like, oh, I am having a big emotion right now, or I'm having a lot of little ones. It's very interesting can kind of create a little bit of that space and softening to allow them to come and go without kind of sweeping you out to sea and feeling like you're helpless in the presence of them. Right. And I think too, especially like family is always an advanced practice because we've got history, we've got buttons that get pushed, we've got habits, right? Like the patterns and the dynamics. So it can really be interesting when we bring that space and that kind of a softening that allows for the dynamic range and movement of all of that.
One of the things that's coming up for me is, as you're mentioning all of that, is this question of how do you how do boundaries play a role in compassion? You can think of compassion as being very much like a almost selfless thing at its extreme, um, and yet there's a need not to lose yourself, or there's a fear of losing yourself in practicing compassion sometimes.
I was gonna say, I think to really cultivate compassion for others, just like so many things, it starts with having compassion for yourself. And I think by putting up boundaries, you're showing yourself compassion, and well, you're showing yourself love where you're taking care of yourself. And in a sense, by putting up boundaries, you're also showing compassion for others, because say you don't put up these boundaries, but then you go to this family thing that overlapped or whatever, but then you show up with this like resentment, or this like internal tension, and maybe you're not in your heart, you're not your best self, and so you're not necessarily doing a service for others if you're not taking care of yourself first. But yeah, boundaries are always a very tricky, interesting conversation. It's always a work in progress for me personally, putting up boundaries. I think also like empaths have sometimes a hard time with boundaries because they feel so deeply for other people that you want to be there for everyone. But yeah, I think like so many things, like you have to fill up your cup first so that you can really show up for others.
I think that's really interesting. And I 100% agree that, compassion for others does begin with compassion for yourself. I used to teach a meta loving kindness meditation where I use this quote, and it's something I don't remember exactly, but it's something like, if you hate a person, you hate something in them that's a part of yourself, because what's a part of ourselves doesn't just disturb us. So it's like the more accepting and loving you can be of yourself when you show up in the world, I think there's less obstacles to showing that to others. And boundaries play a big role in this. I mean, you think of your relationships that are really close and you're sort of wanting to control them. And sometimes it is because you really love someone. Maybe you see they're doing something that isn't good for them, for example. And there's just this desire to fix it, right? But that's our desire to fix it, right? And so I think again, it's bringing that curiosity to what is it that I can do for myself so that I can feel less agitated, less disturbed when I interact with these people in my lives that sometimes cause that conflict. And I think it's ongoing again, there's no getting it right. There's no like, oh, I figured it out, now I've got it perfectly, because new events, new experiences are constantly entering. So I do think though, it begins, or it can begin, it's definitely worth considering beginning with ourselves.
I love this topic. I feel like this could be a whole workshop, boundaries. So if if anyone who's watching this replay, if you're like, we need to do a workshop on boundaries and mindfulness, email Hannah in the studio. We will find a way to make it happen. So I have been teaching a workshop. Actually, like I taught one last week and I'm teaching one next week on boundaries with love. And so this is a very timely topic. Here's what I will share kind of in the context of here today. I think of boundaries as, number one, it's an agreement you make with yourself, first and foremost, right? Like it's an agreement you make with yourself. It is not something where you're like, here's a list of my boundaries, please adhere to these in our relationship. Like that is not what it is. But I think it's also very helpful. Like if you're a person who's like, I really need to learn about boundaries, I just want to offer, it can be very helpful to also get curious about the language and frameworks around codependency, because they often show up when the fear is, I'm afraid to have a boundary because I'm afraid of how this person will respond. They'll be disappointed. It will rupture the relationship. Our relationship is dependent upon me, kind of trying to, for me, it was like, I'm going to be sneaky to try to control things because I think I know how things need to be. And it was very kind of subconscious, right? But it really was this sense, like so similar to what Manisha was saying, like, I have an idea of how things should be that will make things good. And instead of being direct and communicating my expectations, desires, and needs, and including if I'm like, yeah, I'm actually not interested in that, I would just secretly try to do it behind the scenes to avoid any direct conversation about it. And I thought I was being really kind and clever, but actually I was being very manipulative and guarded and sneaky. I was actually being the unsafe person, right? And it was like a hard and long thing for me to learn, but I'm just like, oh, thank God I did, because everything gets better. So I think that when we're talking boundaries and compassion, it is this sense of, if we are connected to an awareness of what's going on with me, let me take full loving responsibility for me and what I need and where I'm at. That is where you begin with understanding what is the agreement I'm going to make with myself in this relationship, whether it's a relationship with a person, a relationship with your work, a relationship with, like your health, like all kinds of things. But it's a very rich topic. It's definitely a life skill that I don't think we learn as kids, right? Because we don't often have it modeled for us. And we're kind of, I think, especially as, I don't know, we're often socialized to like get along with others, put others first, and they never loop back. We never loop back and say, oh, but you also really need to understand what you need. And those needs may change as you grow in your life. And you want to have the ability to articulate and negotiate and ask and have like a very open relationship with that.
I love what you said about boundaries and agreement with yourself. And I think that's so powerful in like compassion and working with other people, where I think it's easy to think of boundaries as like rules you're putting on other people, like you can't do this, you can, but really it's like, oh, I will not feel okay if this continues to happen, so I'll remove myself from the situation. And then it's like they get to choose if they're going to agree and like not play by your rules, but it's really an agreement with yourself and not like controlling or putting these boundaries on other people. Yeah, I love how you said that.
And like final note to like two related, I think for a lot of us, we don't think about boundaries until we're in a reactive state.
Yeah.
Until we feel we've been injured or something is like not okay. And then we're like, whoa. So very often boundaries feel like a reactive defensive maneuver, where we're actually going like that, as opposed to thinking about it in advance of like, oh, when I'm really clear in my boundaries, it actually makes connection easier. It expands the possibilities. It actually increases the things that I'm wanting to have, like honesty, trust, safety, connection. And I'm not making someone else responsible for that. Right? It's like, oh, I can do that. Oh, how lovely. I can do that on my side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think defining what boundary means to you is really important. Culturally, boundaries look different, right? There's some cultures where families are so connected and involved and living together for intergenerational households, for example. And then there are cultures where, people are very independent and boundaries look different. And being able to have a boundary within whatever kind of relationship um, your life sort of has nurtured it's interesting, right? Boundary doesn't mean disconnection. In fact, as Kim was saying, boundary means healthier connections. And I think that's a concept that I know for myself is evolving. Like, what does that mean? Culturally, boundaries are really murky in my culture. It doesn't really feel like there are any. So within that context, how is there safe, lines between people? When are you overstepping into somebody's emotional world where you don't belong? And I think that's just, an ongoing practice of curiosity, awareness, and you know, being able to sit with uncertainty and also being able to show restraint in reacting. And that is, I think, a form of love and compassion.
Yeah. And I'm wondering too, like, because I'm also wanting to talk about kindness, which has kind of been present here, but, kind of like one of the themes I'm hearing us continue to revisit is there's, there's the concept, the idea of it. And then for everyone, our work is to ask ourselves, what does this mean for me in my life, in my context? Like, how will I use this or make this like a real active thing, right? And I think too, it's actually very meaningful to remember that each individual person, like we're making those decisions for ourselves. So it can be helpful to both unhook from comparison, like, is it supposed to look like that person's, right? Like to really be like, no, like part of the creative dynamic part about it is you get to apply it to your life, as opposed to assuming it's supposed to look like something else. And I'm gonna loop this into the kindness piece, right? Because this idea of kindness and what does it mean as a practice, and how does it change things when you're coming from like this intention of kindness. And so as I was preparing for our conversation and kind of reflecting on my own experience, so I used to be a fitness instructor. And I taught a 1-hour group fitness class in a gym in a big room with wall-to-wall mirrors. And what I noticed was my students would come and all of our work was really like facing like mostly like the mirror. And I noticed that, so my students are looking in the mirror for like an hour. And what is it that they are saying to themselves about who they see in the mirror? And I thought, people are coming to the gym because there's something that they want to change, right? They want something bigger, they want something smaller, they want something stronger, they want something more flexible, like there's something they want to change. And what is the voice that's driving that change? And so one of the things I started to do in my classes was I really started to infuse like this message of kindness, right? So when you look in the mirror, I want you to tell yourself, how amazing it is that you're even here. I want you to appreciate yourself, like that you're sweating. How amazing is it that we can sweat, right? Like just bringing the awareness to what is the narrative that you are telling yourself about yourself, because that makes such a big difference, And I used to kind of tease them. I'm like, you ever get to that part where you feel like, oh my God, I'm dying. Like this, when is this going to be over? I'm dying. I was like, no, that wobbly feeling, it means you're alive. This is what life feels like. It's wobbly and sweaty. And like, how amazing is that? And it was so fun because once they like the energy, that feeling of like, I am here, not because there's something wrong with me that I need to fix, but actually because being alive is amazing. Being able to move is amazing. And that gets us out of the comparison. It gets us out of that like harsh judgment. And when you're fueling the movement from kindness, it completely changes the experience.
Yeah. Piggybacking on your example of a mirror and what you're saying to yourself, I've heard a lot of people recently talking about putting a picture of like your toddler self, like cute, smiling on your mirror, so that when you go and get ready in the morning or when you're walking out the door, instead of any negative things that come up, you like look at this version of you that's so sweet and innocent and pure. And it's like, what would you say to this person? And then it's like, you can't be mean to your toddler you wouldn't say, and I think it comes back to also being in the gym. I've definitely been there where I'm like looking at the mirror and unhappy with something and like get down on myself. And it's just remembering to find gratitude, find compassion, find love for, yeah, where you're at.
I think that what you guys are talking about is so important. I think that we live in a challenging world in so many ways. There's a lot of expectations. This is said probably way too much, but just with the advent of social media and the internet even, there's always something out there about how to better yourself, a list of 10 ways to improve this or that or whatever. And it can be about our physical bodies, it can be about our mental health, our well-being, our spiritual self. And it can be a bit overwhelming to know where to begin. And rather than actually motivating, it can really, for some folks, I think, make you feel a little insecure even more than maybe you're already dealing with. So I think it's important to just know that we're living in challenging times. And when it comes to kindness, I think we're absolutely, at least as far as I can remember in my lifetime, living in a very divisive environment, one where we're sort of picking sides and being on a team. And that doesn't necessarily cultivate kindness, and just, holding a bit of awareness about that. And I think it's a challenge sometimes to feel kindness, um, particularly for those people that we're not super connected to, right? People that we don't really know that well. When you go through the meta loving kindness, sometimes you pick someone you don't really know very well to show that kindness to, um, or to express that for that person. And I think knowing that all of this is an extraordinary challenge, to have love for ourselves, to have love for others, to show grace to others, to form those really deep, meaningful connections with people it's a challenge. And so bringing a little bit, I think what helps is easefulness. Again, I always come back to that word because I don't have a better word for it, but like just taking it easy and knowing that when we're not kind to ourselves, when we don't feel kindness to another person, these are really normal human experiences. And that when we practice in this sort of, when we're bringing awareness to that, particularly when we talk about meditation practice, that bringing a little bit of ease into it, not perfection, is helpful.
So much yes to that. And like two thoughts coming to mind. One is, so I sometimes will tease it's not teasing, but like I'll sometimes say to my boyfriend, I'll say, I am the most grumpy, judgmental meditation teacher you've ever met. And so I also just want to normalize like the human experience. Because I think sometimes we think, oh, if this person is in the teacher seat, it must mean that they've overcome all these things. And it's like, no, like we're human, we're all practitioners, we're all learning. And so, it is like, I don't think there's ever a place where you're like, if I just meditate enough, how long do I have to meditate before I just float on a cloud of kindness in the world? And I don't think that is how it works. So I just super appreciate, Manisha, you kind of naming that in that way. And also what's interesting is I found sometimes it's actually very easy for me to be kind to strangers because I don't have any information about them. And I can kind of just like a blank page. We're always filling things in. We're always, it's so easy to use our mind to project a story on somebody. And what's interesting is to also notice it's like, oh, I don't know anything about this person. And so I can offer them kindness freely. But like, I can't remember who mentioned traffic or road rage, but the moment they cut me off in traffic, now I've got a story about it, right? And it's not the story of, oh, they're in a rush to get home because they have a kid who really needs to go to the bathroom. It's like, I make it personal. So it is super interesting to notice, like, where does it feel easy to access and offer kindness to others and for self? Where does it feel sticky or challenging? Or where do I get forgetful to offer kindness to others and to self? And also, as we are moving into the holidays, if anyone is planning any travel, especially any flying, I will tell you, this is my secret meditation power move, which is to, before you get to the airport, you just decide, I'm going to carry all this kindness and compassion in my heart for myself and everyone who is just trying to get to where they're going. Right? Because emotion is also contagious. We can kind of feel and perceive the emotion around us. And it is really interesting when you're in a place where people have a lot of anxiety or stress or fear, or just like they're tired, to choose, I'm going to bring as much kind of kindness and compassion as I can. I'm just going to be that way today. Right? And see what happens when you go through security. Like, I'm telling you, it changes the experience for you and for everyone around you.
I love what you're talking about, Kim, of that sometimes it's easy to find kindness for certain groups, certain people, and sometimes it's tough. And I think the practice sometimes is like noticing, being aware of the types, maybe, you know, like as we've said, the world is divisive, and maybe like we're kind to people who are similar to ourselves, but people who have different worldviews, it's hard to find this kindness or compassion. And something I've been thinking about a lot this past year is like such a simple term, but both things can be true. Like, we live in this world that's very black and white, you know, like this or that, right and wrong. And it's coming back to like, well, maybe there's truth in both. Maybe I don't agree with this person or this thing, but maybe both things can be true. And like, how can I show up kindly, compassionately, in a way that is less divisive? Because really, that's how you have to show up if you want to kind of mend whatever pain and suffering is going on. Yeah, I had another thought, but it slipped my mind, so I'll come back to it.
What I'm noticing in coming up for me as we're talking about this is this really interesting interplay between compassion and kindness and judgment, whether we're judging ourselves or we're judging other people, and trying to untangle that and understand that one of the things I'm curious about is I think there can be a fear that if we in order, or a thought that in order to be compassionate or to practice kindness, we have to sort of suppress our judgment. Like, I can't, like your example from the beginning of the conversation, Kim, of I've got this relative who's got these totally different perspective, and I have to just set aside my thoughts, my judgments about the situation and the person in order to feel compassion and kindness. And I'm curious about to what extent that's helpful, and to what extent that feels like, well, then am I condoning the other person if I don't engage them? I'm just curious what your thoughts on that interesting intersection.
Such a good question. My perspective is that judgment is not a bad thing. It's a useful thing. And as an adult, exercising like good judgment is part of being an adult human. Like, that's what we do. What becomes interesting though, and what the practice is we want to notice the judging. And we also want to notice, I sometimes think of like being judgmental or doing judgment. It's like a tool. You can use it in useful ways, but you don't want to over rely on it. And you want to be really aware of how you are using it. Right? That's kind of that, I think for me, that sense of waking up to being onto yourself, to noticing, oh yeah, like I have these judgments and I'm very aware of that. And actually, maybe I love them. Like, I'm actually like very judgmental. It's fine. Right? Like, this is me and my human condition. And I also set that aside when I choose to, because my intention is actually to engage with this person on this dimension or in this way, right? Even in the presence of my own judgment, can I still access compassion, kindness, which is also why so much of the practice in meditation is around cultivating the unconditional, unconditional equanimity, unconditional curiosity, unconditional loving kindness for people that isn't dependent upon whatever judgment is also in play. So I think there are some interesting dimensions to it, right? Like it is dynamic, which is another word we've used here a lot. And so the intention is not, I will suppress or ignore or put all judgment aside. Like that's actually not really the goal. The goal is increased awareness of what's arising in the moment. And then from that, what do you choose? Right? The power of that choice and how you are being in relationship with the moment as it's unfolding. That's how I think about it.
Yeah. I love that, like, what do I choose to do in this moment? And I think with boundaries, sometimes, as tough as it sounds, the most compassionate thing with boundaries is taking distance from a person. And one thing that comes up with like my family, my extended family is like addicts. Sometimes when you continue to show compassion and go back and be supportive, you're almost enabling it. So from a compassionate place, like if you really want to help this person, as hard as it is, sometimes the compassionate thing is distance, even though that doesn't in the moment feel in your heart compassionate, like sometimes that's what's needed. So yeah, boundaries are very dynamic. They're hard. And they're so personal. They look so different for everyone in every situation, but a boundary and compassion doesn't always have to be like supporting a toxic environment or a toxic relationship that's going on.
I think what everyone has said so far, I don't have a whole lot to add, but thinking about judgment, just also as you guys have expressed, is, learning how to use your judgment in a compassionate way, you know? Judgment, I think, is a word that feels really messy. It feels really like, don't judge, right? I don't know. I have two teenage daughters. I hear that phrase a lot. Don't judge me. Um, and it can feel really hard to feel judged, absolutely. And yet at the same time, I do, like you guys are saying, there's room for judgment. There's a reason we have the capacity to judge. It's a part of our human experience, and it can be really important at times. And just using it as part of our practice to notice how we can show up with compassion in judgment when it's there, and decipher our judgment a little bit, knowing where it's coming from. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to add on that. You guys have sort of covered everything. I've learned a lot.
Thank you. Thank you all for for tackling that. One thing that's coming to mind for me as we're talking um, about judgment and compassion and kindness, all the interplay of all of that too, is that we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. Like we have to be willing to feel caught in between all of these different desires. I want to be compassionate. What is the right thing right now to be compassionate? I don't know. I did this before and this thing happened and I don't want that again, like, or whatever it is. Or even in a very simple, much more perhaps simpler example of just seeing something or a relationship between two people that is uncomfortable to be around, and to just be able to feel, wow, it's really uncomfortable for me to be here when these two relatives go at it or whatever it is. um, and it comes back to that point that several of you have brought up about it starting with that awareness of the willingness to engage with and accept what's going on in the moment and then make a choice from there. I'm really hearing that.
I think that's also sometimes the hardest thing, especially if it's, like we bring our past experiences with us, and we often are making decisions based on what happened before. And sometimes that is great, but sometimes that really trips us up, right? So this idea too with meditation that every moment is new. Like the breath you're breathing now, you've never breathed before, and you'll never breathe again. And I also find that helps me when I'm in a moment with a person or in a situation that's like, oh, this might just be like that last time, right? So instead of kind of just, it's like I'm not in the moment, I'm reacting to my memory, which is also an imperfect, recollection. And so that there's something that's so interesting when we do that practice of let me be in this moment and let me be curious about what will unfold here, because there are a few ways that things could go, right? And I might make a different choice this time, and I might see them make a different choice this time. And let's, like that, just that bringing of the curiosity into the present moment and being aware of, oh, am I making this decision, or if I'm behaving this way from a desire to be protective based on something from before. I mean, it's a really rich place to reflect upon, right? And you know what, the last thing I want to say too on this is that compassion is not about let me make everything better for you. That is not what that is, right? Like compassion is that, like this internal state of, oh, like I see that you're in suffering, or I see you're in discomfort. I desire that be lifted. It is not like, oh, let me take care of that for you, right? That's not the same thing.
I love what you're saying about bringing it into the present moment and kind of like surrendering or just allowing whatever happens to happen. And I think something with judgments is like, we all have judgments, but maybe we can just hold them loosely and, like allow people to act differently in new situations and not expect them to be their old self. Like I've, been through this journey of meditating and understanding myself better. And, like ways I acted maybe 5-10 years ago, I wouldn't act today. And just from like that progression, I think it's easy when we make judgments. We want to put people in boxes and hold on to these things because it's how we understand the world. But when we allow ourselves to evolve and we allow other people to evolve and hold on to these judgments lightly, it's okay to have these judgments. We are just showing up in the present moment with like this awareness of anything is possible, like the past isn't necessarily what's going to happen in the present.
Well, I really appreciate the richness of this topic and all the places that we've gone with it. We have just a few minutes left, and I'm curious, I would love to hear from each of you if there is a one particular practice that you would recommend, whether it's in meditation or it's in daily life, that you turn to help yourself find compassion and kindness, or to calibrate compassion and kindness. I would love to close with each of you sharing uh, one of those practices.
I can go first. This is something that's taken me a long time to understand and to practice myself. People often say, take some time for self-care. And I've had moments where I'm like, that's really an overused term. What does that even mean? And that seems so indulgent. And so taking a little time to figure out what is a self-care activity that can show some compassion to yourself, cultivating a sense to be well, therefore then being able to be compassionate and kinder to other people. Noticing, learning what that activity is for yourself. Excuse me, sorry, I have no control over that. And then really intentionally doing that practice, because it can be really easy to let go of a self-care practice when you're feeling emotionally dysregulated, when you're feeling grief, when you're feeling unhappy. And if you indulge in those sorts of feelings, then your ability to be compassionate for yourself is going to decrease. And your ability, therefore, to be compassionate to others is also going to be affected. So if that means I take a walk every day, and right today I don't feel like doing it, I don't want to do it because I'm really worried about this, or this thing happened. Do it anyway. And I think that has taken me a lifetime to learn to do it anyway, because you will feel better and you will stay kind of above the line, you know, with regard to your experience on a daily basis. So that's a really personal suggestion. And it can mean anything, you know, self care. Don't bring a judgment aspect into that. If it means watching a silly show on TV, if it means having some chocolate, it doesn't matter what it is, but do it anyway.
So the meditation we did at the beginning of practice, just like taking a moment to feel your heart, find love for someone, find love for yourself, was something that I really did a lot when I started out my meditation practice. And I think of the heart as like a muscle where the more you practice like feeling love, it's easier for it to cultivate. So just it kind of expands naturally. And then my personal practice is I realized that I was someone who tended to have a lot of negative self-talk throughout my life, just day to day, like in interaction, I would say something. I'd be like, why did I say that? That was so stupid. What do they think of me? And when I became aware of these thoughts, obviously you feel tension, or I would feel tension when I would feel these thoughts. So I started just saying, whenever I'd say something negative, I would stop and I'd say, I love you. And I would just keep doing that. And now it's like almost subconscious, but I'll like feel myself feel tension and then I'll just say, I love you. And it's almost like I've like trained I'm like slow, you know, it's an everyday practice, but it's like I'm slowly training myself just to come back to love versus like this tension, tight, like, ooh, place.
For me, it's I'm glad you're here. Like just thinking that thought, I'm glad you're here. Like you're seeing a friend, like, I'm glad you're here. Like think that to yourself. Think that when you're brushing your teeth. Think that when you know, go to the grocery store, like think that about the people around you. Just holding that one thought in mind is a very powerful way to bring that connection to love and that connection to kindness and that connection to just like, I'm glad you're here. It is surprisingly effective. So try that one on. That's what I would offer to everybody.
I love that. I'm excited to try that. That's great. Thanks for sharing.
My pleasure.
Thank you all for sharing and for being a part of this conversation. Um, and I've certainly got a lot more to marinate on, especially going into those family gatherings, which for me are, as for many, are often great training grounds for compassion, cultivating compassion and kindness, and playing with judgment. Before we close today, I just want to mention a couple of things we have coming up within meditation. So first of all, we have daily classes online through Zoom. And then we also, this coming week, we have a couple of extra special things going on Sunday, November 20th. Devin Pipers, one of our other teachers, is going to be offering a workshop online specifically on setting yourself up for less holiday stress. And I'm pretty sure that the things we're talking about today are a piece of that. And she also has other ideas and tools to offer there. And then another teacher, Desiree Matloop, is going to be offering a class on Thanksgiving Day in the morning Pacific time to help you be with whatever is up for you on Thanksgiving morning and set yourself up to be able to move forward into the interactions you're going to have in the rest of the day with as much kindness and compassion for yourself and others as you can muster. So both of those events are coming up in the next week, and you can find more information about them on our website, which is withinmeditation.com/events. And I hope to see all three of you lovely teachers teaching in the studio soon. Lauren, as she mentioned, teaches on Saturday mornings, and Kim and Manisha get to guest teach periodically sprinkled in. So keep an eye on the schedule for when you can join them next. Thank you all so much for being a part of this today.
Thanks, Hannah and everyone. It was so good
Thank
to see you all.
you.
Bye.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.